In today's episode of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast, Adam Sparks joins me to convince every educator to ditch AI detection tools and focus on what really matters, the writing process. Now, if you're not a writing or English language arts teacher, you may be tempted to skip this episode, but don't. You'll hear things that apply to all classrooms. Plus, we discuss alternatives to AI detection like Brisk, Draftback, revision history tracking, and short answer, and we share actionable strategies to teach writing effectively in the age of AI. From fostering transparency with students to leveraging powerful tools for formative assessment, this conversation is packed with insights to elevate your writing instruction. If there's one sound that echoes through my house more than anything else, it's the word Mom. Our kids yell from across the house with the most random questions and requests. Where did you put my flannel PJ pants? Or, have you seen my toothbrush? It's like they think my wife's a human help desk. I keep telling her she needs a digital system where the kids could submit requests and she could follow up when she's got time. While my wife's still waiting for that personal kid request system, today's sponsor, Vizor, has you covered when it comes to managing IT issues in schools. Their help desk software lets students and staff submit issues through a self-service portal, emails turn into tickets, and you get all the details like serial numbers and warranties right inside the ticket. It even automates tasks like managing loaner devices. For my educational duct tape listeners, there's a special deal at vizor.cloud/Jake. That's vizor.cloud/Jake. Along with that special pricing, you can get some awesome swag and a copy of my book, Educational Duct Tape. With Vizor, managing IT issues is easier than finding a missing toothbrush.
Welcome to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast with Jake Miller.
Hey there, duct tapers. Whether you're a longtime listener or tuning in for the very first time, welcome to the show. I'm Jake, a personalized learning and ed tech specialist and former middle school teacher from Ohio. And by joining me here today, you are officially a duct taper. You didn't have to pay to get that license or turn in any professional development credits or hours or go online and create an account with two-factor authentication or anything like that. You just tune in and bam, duct taper. That means you are on board with the educational duct tape metaphor. And that means that you see educational technology not as the end goal, but as a powerful tool like duct tape used to solve problems, achieve goals, and meet learning standards. Okay, now that that's out of the way, 4, 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year! It is 2025 and I cannot believe it. I hope you had a Happy New Year celebration and a joyful holiday season filled with laughter, relaxation, and maybe even a little bit of time to recharge. You sure do deserve it. Speaking of recharging, today's episode is packed with so much amazingness that it'll be like recharging your teaching battery. I think you're going to hear me geeking out throughout this episode. I had so much fun in this interview because it was just fascinating. It was just good education nerd talk, in my opinion. I really enjoyed it. In fact, Adam Sparks, today's guest, shared so many valuable insights. Like, it was so good, so much. And he responded so thoughtfully to so many questions that I asked. I mean, so many. Like, I was so fascinated and interested that the questions just kept popping up. So I kept asking him so many questions during the conversation, and he responded so thoughtfully to them that I decided to split this interview into 2 episodes because there's just so much goodness in it. It's amazing. I think trying to take it all in and process all of the educational implications and goodness in it would be like eating back-to-back Thanksgiving dinners. Not ideal, no matter how much you love stuffing. And I do love stuffing. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on the second serving of stuffing coming next week. I mean, the second half of today's interview with Adam Sparks. So that is coming up next week. Be subscribed so that you don't miss it. Also, I'm excited to share that in just a few weeks, actually about 1 week from the time you're hearing this, and right around the time that episode with Adam comes out, I will be in Orlando, Florida, sunny, warm, not snowing like here in Ohio, Orlando, Florida, as a featured speaker at FETC, the Future of Educational Technology Conference. If you are attending, I'd love for you to come say hi. I would be thrilled to meet some fellow duct tapers in person. And I'll probably have some stickers and buttons and other swag available too. So please do stop and say hi if you're there. And today's guest, Adam, as you're going to hear shortly, is also going to be there. So I hope you'll say hi to both of us. But if you're not making the trip, but still want to connect, you can always say hello on Blue Sky. It has a blue sky in the name. It's not quite the blue skies of Orlando in January, but Blue Sky is my new favorite social media. And so I hope whether you're going to FETC or not, you will say hi there because I'd love to hear from you. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Let me just grab my soapbox from over here. Yeah. There we go. That's perfect. Climb up on there. So a few nights ago, we decided to order takeout. This is almost always a headache-inducing activity. So with the wildly unpredictable tastes and befuddling stubbornness of our three kids, and to a lesser extent, the preferences of my wife and I, finding one meal that works for everyone is like finishing the New York Times crossword on a Saturday. That's the hardest day. But this time, it was like solving the Saturday New York Times crossword in pen. Yeah, right. In pen. Not pencil, no erasing. That's because we had added a new wrinkle. My dad. His doctor recently told him to cut back on cholesterol, amongst other things. So now I'm not just scrolling through options for my picky kids. I'm filtering out anything that might spike his lipid levels. I got to be honest, I didn't even know what lipids were last week, but now they're a part of my takeout ordering considerations. I should point out, they're not really a part of my dad's takeout ordering considerations, though. He's like, whatever. As many of you know, at some point, we all end up doing a little parenting of our own parents. Anyhow, those cholesterol considerations got me thinking about one of my very favorite episodes of one of my very favorite podcasts. And that podcast is Revisionist History by Malcolm Gladwell. And the episode that I'm referring to is called The Basement Tapes. It, ironically, is also a story about a man, his father, and cholesterol. So the father in the story, Dr. Ivan France, was thinking about lipid levels, but not to inform his takeout ordering. You see, he was a cardiologist who spent his life doing research to promote what he believed was a healthier alternative to butter and animal fats, polyunsaturated oils. His goal? Prevent heart disease by lowering cholesterol, ultimately saving lives. At the time, the thinking was that replacing saturated fats, like delicious butter, with polyunsaturated oils, like margarine, would lower cholesterol and, in turn, prevent heart disease. So France set out to study this hypothesis. But here's the heartbreaking twist. Decades later, his own research revealed that while these healthier oils did reduce cholesterol, they also came with unintended harms. You see, the polyunsaturated oils that Dr. France integrated into his test subjects' diets were lower in cholesterol, but were also higher in something called linoleic acid. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm really not sure. It was in the podcast. I guess I can go listen and see. Anyhow, at first, this whole replacement that lowered cholesterol seemed okay. After all, lowering cholesterol was essentially their goal. But it turned out that consuming too much linoleic acid turned out to have its own risks. You see, elevated levels have been linked to inflammation and other health issues, including an increased risk of heart disease, the very thing that Dr. France was trying to prevent. In other words, his well-intentioned strategy for heart health inadvertently created new problems, undermining his original goal. And that kind of unintended harm often happens when we focus too narrowly on solving one part of a complex problem and we lose sight of the bigger picture. At this point, you're probably wondering, Jake, why are you talking about takeout and cholesterol and linoleic acid? Well, this story of unintended harms from a well-intentioned person got me thinking about a similarly well-intentioned fix in education: AI detection tools. You see, much like polyunsaturated oils, those tools initially seemed like a simple solution to a complex problem. But as with linoleic acid, the surface solution might hide deeper, unintended harms. At first glance, AI detection tools seem like a simple, straightforward solution to the growing issues of students using AI to generate their work. Dishonest use of AI is a real concern. And AI detection seems like an easy fix. Plug in the assignment, run the software, and voila, you've caught the cheaters. Problem solved, right? But just like Dr. Francis polyunsaturated oils, these tools come with hidden costs. And the more we rely on them, the more these unintended harms reveal themselves. Molly Cloder and I discussed those unintended harms in an earlier educational duct tape episode, and I also referenced some powerful points that today's guest, Adam Sparks, made in a series of tweets that later became a blog post, but I referenced those in that conversation. You see, first, Adam pointed out that these tools are notoriously unreliable. Studies show they have a false positive rate of over 20%. That means for every 5 students flagged for using AI, 1 is likely completely innocent. Imagine being a student who spent hours writing an essay only to be accused of cheating. And while an algorithm may identify the essay as AI generated, it's not the algorithm delivering the accusation. It's your teacher, one of the most important adults in your life. So why are these tools so unreliable? Well, it's because they rely on patterns and probabilities and algorithms to detect AI-generated text. And that's not a foolproof process. There's no receipt in the writing that says this was made with ChatGPT. They're just looking at the text the tool is and saying, what would AI write next? And if that's what's written there, then they're like, I think this was AI. When a human could have written those things. Actually, they often misinterpret differences in how students write, which means that non-native English speakers and neurodivergent learners end up being at a higher risk of being falsely flagged. This all means that instead of fostering a safe, supportive learning environment for our students, especially the ones who need it most, these tools can create a culture of suspicion and distrust. So that's our first 2 unintended harms: false accusations that undermine fairness and damaged relationships that erode trust. Trust is the foundation of any effective classroom. When a student feels like their teacher doesn't trust them, or worse, actively assumes they're cheating, that trust is broken. And once it's broken, it's hard to rebuild. Finally, in Adam's post, he pointed out a third issue: the opportunity cost. School budgets are tight, and some of the AI detection tools aren't cheap. By investing in AI detection tools, you're taking funds that could have been spent on something else, an initiative or a tool that could actually improve student learning, and you're redirecting those funds towards something that might harm it, these AI detection tools. So what are those unintended harms again? Number 1, false accusations that undermine fairness. Number 2, damaged relationships that erode trust. And number 3, wasted resources that could be better spent on real learning. In the end, AI detection tools might seem like a quick fix, but they're a lot like those polyunsaturated oils. They address one issue on the surface while potentially causing harm beneath it. And here's the kicker: the goal isn't even to catch students. Your goal is not to catch kids cheating. Your goal is to guide them toward meaningful learning and real growth. And that is never as simple as pushing a button. So as Carol Commodore wisely said, what we know today doesn't make yesterday wrong. It makes tomorrow better. So if you used an AI detection tool yesterday, or last week, or last month, or last year, let's not focus on the wrongness of it. Let's learn to make tomorrow better. You see, when you used those AI detection tools, you were no more wrong than Dr. France was for believing in a solution to heart disease. He was doing the best he could with the knowledge he had at the time, just like you were. As you'll find if you listen to that Revisionist History episode, which I hope you do because it's really good, and I've linked it in the show notes for you, but you'll find that the key part came later, after Dr. France's passing. His son, also a doctor, helped researchers use his father's work to make tomorrow better. He knew that upholding his father's legacy wasn't about defending a flawed hypothesis about polyunsaturated oils or outdated beliefs about margarine. It was about being humble enough to change. And that's what science is. And his father was a scientist, so of course that's what he believed. So now it's our turn to embrace what we've learned, not cling to what we used to believe. It is clear that AI detection tools are not the answer. So how do we do better? Well, I think to prevent cheating, we need to address its root causes. First, we must shift our learners away from performance-oriented, extrinsically motivated goals. When students are focused on completing a task, or getting a grade, or avoiding punishment, or pleasing an adult, these are all performance-oriented or extrinsically motivated things. When they're focused on that, the temptation of an easy button, like cheating, becomes really appealing because all they're worried about is the end result, and cheating gets you there faster and more efficiently. Second, we must help them work within their zone of proximal development. Meaning, if the work is too hard and they don't see a path to success, or if it's too easy and feels meaningless, cheating once again becomes tempting. Third, we must strive to highlight the relevance in the learning for our students. If it feels like irrelevant, busy work that has no value beyond grades or compliance, why wouldn't they look for shortcuts? When students see how their work connects to their goals or interests or the real world, the temptation to cheat often fades. Again, to prevent cheating, we need to address its root causes. When we focus on meaningful goals, appropriate challenges, and relevance, we create a learning environment where students are far less tempted to cheat. In today's episode, Adam Sparks is going to share some thoughtful, relationship-centered strategies that I think will help create the learning environments we all strive for. In closing, a simple statement: our goal isn't to catch students. It's to guide them toward becoming self-directed learners, prepared for the future. And that is never as simple as pushing an easy button.
Today's guest.
Well, today's guest is Adam Sparks. Adam taught for 7 years before recently finishing his master's in learning design and technology at Stanford. While at Stanford, Adam designed a writing tool called Short Answer that he now builds full-time. As a part of his work with Short Answer, Adam leads PD with schools across the country on adjusting writing instruction in the wake of AI. You could reach Adam on email at adam@myshortanswer.com, on their website at myshortanswer.com, or on Twitter/X at Mr. Sparks Tweets. Or if you're like me and you've transitioned over to Blue Sky, you can find him at adamsparks.bsky.social. Those things are all in the show notes, but not in the show notes. Actually, here in the podcast is Adam himself. What's up, Adam?
How's it going, Jake? I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. So Adam and I have been talking about doing this interview behind the scenes for a little while because I became aware of Adam's work a couple months ago and was really, really excited about it. And I was like, Adam, I need to have you on the podcast. And I am really excited that you said yes, Adam. So thank you for that.
Of course, I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, so some of you might recognize the name because I've referenced him before, and maybe you were part of Adam becoming kind of a viral sensation on Twitter. I mean, you were pretty hip, right? You were definitely trending.
I was the anti-AI detection guy for like a good 2 to 3 months there, which was an interesting experience.
I'm glad you didn't change your Twitter handle over to @the anti-AI detection guy.
I guess. No, not yet.
But you could have like a theme song that's kind of like the Bill Nye the Science Guy song, but it's the anti-AI detection guy.
I think I'm more into Bill Nye than whatever that would be. but,
Right.
but yeah, maybe.
So I guess for some of you are like, wait, what? Adam is famous on Twitter and is the anti-AI detection guy. So Adam wrote, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, a series of tweets. It was a thread of tweets.
Yeah.
That when I became aware of it was when Matt Miller from Ditch That Textbook shared it out. I think that probably is when it really spread and reached kind of its critical mass. But then it got to the point where you were talking to news outlets and things like that, and Edutopia, right, about the work that you shared in that thread of tweets about the problem with AI detection tools. Yeah, what was the craziest part of that experience? That whole experience.
You just referenced it. It was like having journalists reach out and be like, "We want to talk to you about, the research on AI detection." I'm just like, I'm just a guy on Twitter who read the paper. You know what I mean? So the genesis of it was like, Turnitin, which is the most popular AI detection tool, put out a white paper of like, here's the research supporting our approach. And my wife currently studies education data science at Stanford, and so I hang around with people that know a lot about data science who openly laugh at those types of tools. So I'm like, I'm very interested to read this paper, and dug into it and just immediately found a lot of not direct lying, but lying by omission, which to me is lying, and sort of like obscuring the research to benefit, the tool that they're selling to schools. And that rubbed me the wrong way. So I just put out this Twitter thread of like, here's what it actually says. Here's the research they're citing that actually doesn't support the claims that they're making. And no one read it. Like I put it out. I don't know. I don't even remember the date, but put it out. And then, like a month later or something, a couple of people that were very influential, I think Matt Miller and then Holly Clark retweeted it. And all of a sudden it exploded. And Edutopia is reaching out for interviews, and Turnitin took a keen interest, as you might expect. And I ended up talking to the head of AI at Turnitin, and it turned into this formalized blog post that I've since shared out with the world. And it was a guest blog post with Matt Miller's Ditch That blog. And so, it was a weird, surreal experience to be caught up in a viral Twitter thread.
Yeah. It was so good. And what was fascinating about the Twitter thread, and for those of you that are like, tell me about why, and like you're saying that like they're doing the lying by omission kind of thing in there, which I agree with you, and they want to know more. I'll put a link to the blog post in the show notes, and also we'll talk about it a little bit more too in a couple minutes. But what I think was fascinating about the whole thing was exactly what you said, where they were citing a study that wasn't super favorable to them, and none of us read it, right? We all just trusted it, and you're not a data science guy. You were just a guy who read it. Like, I mean, you were a guy who thought deeply about it, but just read it. And what I love about both the blog post and the Twitter thread is you were just like, I felt like I was along for the ride with you as you were like reading it and going like, wait, what? No, it's you were like live streaming your reaction. Like, those YouTube videos where somebody watches something and they're reacting on the spot right then. That was your thread of you reacting to this article.
Yeah, I mean, literally, it was. It literally was just like a real time sort of reaction to like, my goodness, this is just overt lying. So it was a surreal experience for sure.
Yeah,
I'm happy to dive into any of it specifically if you would like to. But and
we'll get to it. We got to do some fun stuff first, but we'll definitely get to that in a minute. Yeah, like I said, it'll be in the show notes for everybody to check out. Really fascinating stuff that you dug into there. And I think you don't give yourself enough credit in saying you're not a data scientist, because maybe that's good. You were reading it as an educator and a person who cares about education and about writing and about teachers and about schools and about school funding and about a lot of things. And so I think you were the perfect person to be reading it because of the way that you read it. You know what I mean? Like, you took the time to read it, but also you had a perspective that brought about some really valuable takes on what you were reading there.
Well, I hope so. And I hope it moves the needle and discouraging folks from using those types of tools and instead sort of orienting themselves towards more holistic approaches to adjusting writing instruction that need to be made, which I'm excited to talk with you about today.
Yeah, for sure. So before we get into that, Adam, I'm excited that a few weeks after this episode drops, you and I are going to get to meet in person at FETC, right?
Yes, in a much warmer location than rural Nebraska, which is where I'm currently located. So I'm excited for that.
And I'm in Ohio. So yeah, we are both excited to be in Orlando for sure. That is the one thing I'm most excited to be at FETC for. For the listeners who have never heard of FETC, it's the Future of Education Technology Conference. I'd say it's my favorite education conference. Have you been to it before, Adam?
I praise. No, I haven't. I've heard really great things. So this will be our first time going. I'm excited.
Yeah. Nice. So it's like mini ISTE, and ISTE's good, but ISTE is ginormous, and you feel like an ant in a big city or something. I don't even know. Whereas FETC is just big enough to have, you could see anything and hear about anything you want to hear about, but yet feel a little bit more like a community. So I like ISTE too, but FETC is really great and very carefully curated by former educators and led by Jen Womble, who loves education and is very involved in educational technology and just has a great mind for this. I was actually on a webinar for all the presenters and just like listening to her, I was like, this is a person who gets teachers, gets the audience, and gets what good presenting is. And she talked about pedagogy and andragogy, thinking about the adult learners, and like this person gets it. So FETC is a really good conference. I'll put some links for anybody interested in joining us in Orlando. If you can convince your school to send you to Orlando, I've got a discount code I'll put in the show notes for everybody. But are you guys, will you guys have a booth there and presentations? What all are you doing there?
Yeah, we'll have a booth. And then we were encouraged by some friends to do the pitch contest. So we're going to be up on the stage just talking about short answer and trying to convince people to join us and making some of the adjustments to writing instruction that we're going to talk about today. So I'm rapidly preparing my little 3-minute spiel for Orlando. So I'm excited for it. But I've heard so many people say a lot of what you just said. It's like ISTE, but smaller and a lot more personalized and curated. So I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, it'll be a very good time. I'm excited to meet you in person there. I hope anybody that is there will come up and find me and say hi, and come find Adam and say hi, and stop by Short Answer's booth and go to Adam's pitch. I can't believe it's only 3 minutes. Adam, we've already been talking for 3 pitches of time.
I know. It's like a Shark Tank thing, I think. So we'll see, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I hope I can make it to it. I hope my schedule allows that. So FETC, are you doing ISTE? Are you doing any other big conferences in the next months?
This is the first time. Last year, we're basically a bootstrapped organization, which is very different from a lot of the ed techs. And so we have to be a little bit more targeted in our outreach. But this year, we've kind of expanded the footprint. So we were at GATC in Atlanta a couple weeks ago, which was fantastic, really great conference. We're going to be down at FETC. After that, it's TCEA, which is another great conference in Texas. It's in Austin this year. We're English specific, so we're also going to go down to TCT-ELA, which is a much smaller conference, but English specific. Mm-hmm. And then we'll be at ISTE for the first time. And for those that don't know, ISTE is combining with ASCD, which is a major curriculum and instruction organization. So very curious to see this year, like how they handle that, because that's going to be bajillion people in downtown San Antonio. So, but I've never been to ISTE and have always wanted to, both as a former educator, but now especially as an ed tech creator, kind of a bucket list thing. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah. Good time. So anybody, if you're at any of those things, reach out to Adam, make sure you say hi. And if you're organizing a different conference that he didn't just name, maybe you should reach out to him about that as well. So Adam, you mentioned as a former teacher before you were in the ed tech space, what did you teach for those years?
So I taught English and social studies, but mostly social studies for 7 years in the most varied context imaginable. It's almost like hilariously different places. So rural Nebraska, which is where I'm from, urban China for a year, and the southern part of China, and then on the west side of Chicago for a couple of years. So very different contexts.
Wow. Which probably really enables you to have a really cool background in the way you think about classrooms and about teaching and about learning and stuff like that, right?
Definitely. Definitely drove home the idea that in education, everything works somewhere and nothing works everywhere. So you got to cater it. I'm stealing that quote from Dr. Dylan William, by the way. I want to give credit where it's due. But it's very true. Education and what works in education is very contextual. So now, as someone who's building a tool at scale, it's helpful to have that perspective, I think.
Wow. Nothing works everywhere and everything works somewhere. Did I say that right?
That's education research in a nutshell. So
I'm stealing that too. And if it came from Dylan William, it's good stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that's for sure. All right. So I'm already having fun chatting with you, Adam, but we're going to play a game because we have to. It's part of the educational duct tape rule book that a game be played during the interview. Like it's right there. It's clause 5. And so we're going to play a game of 2 truths and 1 lie.
2 truths and 1 lie.
So you're going to read me 3 statements. I'm going to do a horrible job of guessing which one's the lie. I'll get confused about how the game works because that's what normally happens. I may or may not realize what the lie is, and you'll have to tell me, like, wait, Jake, you never figured out the lie. The people who listen know this is how this game goes. But first, what are your 3 statements, Adam?
Yeah, I've got them right here. I'm very excited. So
okay.
The first one, I'm a huge college sports fan. So graduated from Creighton University, small school in Omaha, but we just upset the number 1 team in the country, by the way, in basketball. Mm-hmm. So just a heads up there, go Jays. But so diehard Creighton basketball fan, but controversially being from Nebraska, also a diehard Iowa Hawkeyes football fan. So that's item number 1. Item number 2. I once slow danced with Chicago Cubs legend Ernie Banks.
Okay.
And bullet point 3, I road tripped across all the lower 48 states in one summer. Those are my 3. Okay. Trying to think of the 3 most absurd ones I could think of.
Those were pretty absurd. Well, the first one wasn't that absurd, but the other ones were absurd. The funny thing is, when I thought about Creighton, I was like, the only thing I know about Creighton is they are regularly in the NCAA tournament, as a relatively low seed, but always
whoa. We almost made the Final Four.
But weren't they a low seed?
No. We were like, I don't even remember. I think we were 4 or 5 seed that year.
Okay. All right. Yeah. But I was going to say, the next part I was going to say was they always play impressively in it. I'm not a big college hoops fan, but I always do kind of follow along with once they get to the Final Four and stuff like that. Yeah. And Iowa Hawkeyes football. I did not see that coming. And then the Ernie Banks thing, that got me. What position did Ernie Banks play?
He was an outfielder.
Was he a middle infielder?
No, I'm actually not a diehard Cubs fan at all, but I think he was an outfielder.
Okay. I'll believe you.
The statue is outside the stadium. He's a big deal in Chicago.
Yeah. And you slow danced with him. You say, that's the lie.
No, that's real.
What?
That's a real one. I know. That's like the most absurd thing I could think of. So
very absurd.
So just, for the listeners, the lie was the Iowa Hawkeyes thing. I'm literally hiding my Nebraska Cornhuskers.
I was wondering about that one too, because I was like, wait a minute. Like, I can understand you're not a Creighton football fan, or like big Creighton football fan, but Iowa, not Nebraska.
No, never a Hawks fan. No, I'm a Cornhuskers fan, like diehard when it comes to football. But no, so Omaha is home of baseball legend Bob Gibson. And so every year he would host this thing called the Bob Gibson All-Star Classic, and my mom would take me up, and it was a celebrity golf tournament. Okay. But afterwards they put on like a banquet where they have like a dance, and you could pay for tables and sit next to legendary baseball players. And so my mom did it because she took my grandpa, who's a huge baseball fan. And yeah, we were at a table with Ernie Banks, and I was like, and I was in like kindergarten at this point. I was very young, but went out and danced on his shoes. It was like a surreal experience, and a really cool random claim to fame. So yeah, that one's real.
That's crazy. Do you have pictures of you dancing with Ernie Banks?
We have framed pictures in this house. I'm in my parents' house right now. So yeah, it was a big deal.
Wow. Ernie Banks and danced on his shoes.
Pretty cool experience.
I'm not going to go into the Huskers fan thing because I am a Buckeyes fan here in Ohio. So we'll
no comment on that.
Yeah, right. We're not feeling super happy about our fandom right now after a couple weeks ago. There is a certain university that's roughly halfway between Ohio State and where you're at in Nebraska. We're not happy with right now, so we won't discuss that one.
Yeah, I won't touch on that. I know it's a sore subject.
Thank you for that. What was the other thing? What was the third thing?
I did a road trip across all the lower 48 states. Actually, when I was still teaching, and I video blogged it with my kids, and we did this like trivia thing where I made videos and they had to guess where I was at. And that was after my first year of teaching at Louisville. And I desperately wanted to be Anthony Bourdain at that point in my life. So this was my attempt to create a little travel show with my kids. It was awesome. So basically just road tripped all summer and visited 48 states, all the lower,
And then were you blogging it on the YouTube or something? Is that where you put it? And then your students were commenting and watching and stuff like that?
Yeah, it was awesome. Did all sorts of cool stuff. stopped in Montgomery, Alabama, and interviewed Martin Luther King's barber and talked about the civil rights movement, and then like went to.
What?
I know, it's crazy.
That's actually a pretty good idea for a YouTube channel. Like, I think maybe like if short answer doesn't work out, which I think it's going to work out, but if short answer doesn't work out, I think maybe the show should come back.
Well, that was part of the original, I think, conceit. I was a young person and, kind of secretly wanted to be maybe YouTube famous too. And,
right.
and do some educational stuff with my kids and have an excuse to travel. So no, that was a really cool experience.
That is really cool. Yeah. And so the part of the reason your students were watching is you were 23 or whatever, and you were the hip guy teacher that they had. And
at least I thought I was. I don't know if I actually was, but I thought
to them you were at that time. But if I, 44-year-old Jake Miller, did this, like none of my former students are tuning in to that optional content.
Yeah.
But my first year, they'd be like, "Oh, Mr. Miller, you're visiting somewhere random in Ohio? Like, yes, I will watch that, even though I live in that state." But that's because you're the first year teacher and you're cool then. Yeah, we'll take it. Okay, Adam. Let's talk about some educational technology now instead of goofing around about this stuff. So in the Educational Duct Tape podcast, Adam, and for people who may be tuning in for the first time, we think about educational technology as a tool to solve teacher problems or meet teacher goals. Sometimes educational technology is not the only route. Sometimes it's just a strategy we use. There's something we do. It doesn't have to be something digital. It could be something analog. But in general, we're thinking of these practices and these tools as tools that help us do things. So I always start with a teacher question, and now I've got a big one that is on a lot of people's minds, and I know you've done a lot of work in this space, and so you're very well qualified to answer this question for us. And that question is, how should teachers teach and assess writing in the age of AI? So now that our landscape has totally shifted because of AI, I think the classroom that's most impacted by it is the writing classroom. They're all impacted by it. We can't stick our heads in the sand. We have to embrace it in a way because it's part of our world. So we have to admit it's there. So what do we do when we're teaching writing? How do we change how we teach? How do we change how we assess? And I guess my first question, I'm going to lead with this one, is can we just keep doing it the same way and tell kids not to use AI?
Yeah.
And use AI detection tools to see if they're using AI. So that's my first question is, can we, I'm really setting this up as an easy one for you. Can we just act like nothing's changed and just tell them not to use it?
No.
What are your thoughts on that?
Short answer, no pun intended. No.
Right. Please elaborate.
Yeah, no, we cannot. And I mean, there's a larger reason for this that has nothing to do with AI. Like, if you want to step back for a second, even larger, and just think, well, why should we assess writing in a world where machines can now write for kids? Our kids can't write already. Like, so if you look at NAEP scores, the NAEP is like the national, the nation's score. What do they call it? The nation's report card, so to speak. 75% of eighth. And I want to get this right. I think 10th grade, don't quote me on that, but at the high school level, 75% of kids are not proficient in writing. That's based on 2022 NAEP scores. So our kids already can't write. So what we're doing already is not working. So regardless of AI or not, we need to make changes to how we approach writing instruction and assessment. But especially because of AI, we need to rethink writing instruction and assessment. And it's because of what I just mentioned, like machines can now write for humans for the first time in human history. It's a really important practical challenge just as much as it is a philosophical challenge for schools. So no, we can't just keep doing what we always have done and sort of like turn to AI detection buttons as like the easy button of like, well, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, tell kids not to use AI. And then if I suspect them of using it, I'll just run it through, pick your AI detection tool. And then that'll be my way of dealing with it. That's my policy. Here we go. That, which I've seen, unfortunately, a lot of schools and teachers doing, like that's not going to cut it. Unfortunately, it's going to take larger, more fundamental changes. So I have a 5-point plan for you today on sort of first steps we can take and changes that need to happen, I think, to K-12 writing instruction and assessment. And
I'm eager to hear that. I apologize for interrupting the episode, but I've got a quick confession to make. I'm a bit of an out loud thinker. You know the type. I need to talk things through to make sense of my own ideas. My wife, well, let's just say she's a very patient listener, but I'm 99% sure she doesn't always enjoy being my sounding board. That's why I'm so excited about this segment's sponsor, Swivl, and their new tool, MirrorTalk.ai. I'm thinking that MirrorTalk might just free my wife up from listening to all of my processing and reflecting. You see, MirrorTalk lets you or your students reflect out loud, literally, just talk it out, and gives you instant AI-powered insights on how you're thinking and where you can improve. It provides honest, objective feedback that helps develop reflective and metacognitive skills. MirrorTalk is perfect for students, teachers, or anyone looking to think smarter and grow. So if you're ready to stop burdening your loved ones or help your students take their thinking to the next level, head over to MirrorTalk.ai. That's MirrorTalk.ai and check it out. It's like having a thought partner who never gets tired of listening. Speaking of never getting tired of listening, I never get tired of listening to Adam Sparks' wisdom. So let's get back to that interview. Yeah, I'm eager to hear that and eager to share that. I think one thing I want to point out, and I think you will, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm confident, very confident that you're going to agree with me here. I love teachers. I don't know any profession that works harder, cares more, and deals with issues of distrust and doubt and lack of respect as consistently as teachers do. So I understand it's a very hard job. There's not a lot of time to do it. A lot of educators put unpaid time into their work. So when we see a new challenge, it's really hard for them to say like, well, I'll just change the way I do everything, because we understand like you're already working really hard and you're already putting a lot of time, and making a change is hard. It's hard to embrace it. It changes the fabric of what you know to be teaching, and teaching writing, and writing especially, and assessing. It changes the fabric of all that, and that's hard. That's a tough pill to swallow. It requires a lot of work. And so when a teacher wants to use something that is an easy button, so to speak, I understand where that comes from, and I understand why they want to do that. I understand why it's so enticing. The problem is, as you alluded to earlier, that some ed tech companies are very willing to sell their things as those tools, because that's how a society that is a capitalist society works. Like that's what we do, right? And so I understand it all, right? And I agree with you that we can't do that. Can you, before we chart the path forward, I'm gonna put the link to your blog post about AI detection tools in the show notes so everybody can see it. But will you give us like the 1 minute overview of why not?
Yeah.
Why not, Adam?
Put simply, because these tools don't work. So if you talk to any data science person, I talk to a lot of them right now because my wife's a grad student studying data science. They laugh at these tools. They don't work. So researchers have done independent third-party studies on these things. The one that I cite in the blog post is from Dr. Laura Weber-Wolf, who's at the University of Applied Sciences in Berlin. They looked at all the major popular AI detection tools. And this is the study that was actually cited by Turnitin in their white paper. And yes, Turnitin is the best in that study, but then you look at it and you find out that it's wrong over 20% of the time still in the text that it's labeling. And a direct quote from that study is, this is in the findings, these tools should not be used in academic settings. That's coming directly from third-party researchers who I trust over a for-profit company who's trying to make money off of schools. So that's the Weber-Wolf study. I cite another study a lot, which is the University of Maryland's computer science department did a study where basically if you just change the words around of AI's outputs, it changes the statistical probability. Like it changes well, we don't need to get into the nitty gritty of it. It's fine, but it changes the efficacy of these things where it drops it to like by 90%. So if you don't trust third-party researchers, which I just cited, OpenAI wrote a blog post a while back where they basically gave up on developing AI detection software, and they directly address educators in it. And they say, we know this creates challenges where you're not going to know what was AI generated and what's not, but just as much of a challenge is putting a tool into your hands that doesn't work and saying that it does. So we're not going to develop this tool. And interestingly, since then, OpenAI has come out well, they haven't released it, but supposedly they have a watermarking system that's like 99% effective, but they haven't released. So we'll see. Maybe down the road there will be AI detection stuff.
Yeah.
But,
that's interesting, because that's the thing I tell a lot of teachers is the AI detection tool can't find some kind of, I've never said the word watermark, but there's not like a piece of code in the text that an AI detector goes like, aha, here it is. It's AI. There's nothing inherently about the text that tells somebody it came from AI, unless something like that watermarking feature becomes available in the future. But they're looking for patterns. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's looking for patterns. You got what I was going to say, which is large language model powered AI tools like ChatGPT or Claude or pick your poison. They're just stringing together words based on statistical probabilities. So what these AI detection tools do is look for what you would expect, those statistical patterns that you would see in text that's been strung together based on probabilities. But again, the immediate problem with that is change a few words around, you break up those probabilities, and all of a sudden the efficacy drops by 90%. So.
Right.
And even when you don't, even when you copy paste directly from ChatGPT, it's 20% chance it's still going to be wrong. So
yeah,
the efficacy is just not high enough to be used in an academic setting. And it's certainly not high enough to be giving a kid a 0 or, making it your policy for your classroom, at all. So I would strongly encourage your listeners to not use these tools and instead take more holistic approaches to changing how they approach things like, academic integrity and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the main part there is don't use them because they don't actually work. That should be enough. But if it's not enough, you've got to think about what happens if you still choose to use them. I hear a lot of teachers say like, well, it's just be one tool in my toolbox, or it could be the first thing that I use to look at. It could be a conversation starter. And you mentioned some of these things in your article, but you've got to think about, okay, well then what happens, right? Then what happens when you talk to a kid and make it either clear directly, or maybe kind of the kid can tell in your tone that you're suggesting that maybe, possibly, they might have, you suspect that they used AI. And what does that do with your relationship with that kid, whether or not they used it? So there are some interpersonal things that are immensely problematic and probable, I guess, if we choose to use these things. So not only are they not effective, but they can cause a lot of problems. And so, not a good.
Yeah, I just don't think the risk is worth the reward. That's the biggest explanation I hear is like, well, this is just a conversation starter for me. Well, my response to that is you're starting a conversation with a baseless accusation, which is a really troublesome way to like build a relationship with a kid, which is arguably the most important factor in what you're going to be able to get out of a student in your classroom. So anything that gets in the way or potentially gets in the way of building a meaningful relationship with the kid, I think we need to be skeptical of. So I would discourage against these tools.
Yeah, I don't have a study to cite. I don't know where it falls on Hattie's meta-analysis, but the trust between a teacher and a kid, especially between the kid and the teacher, has got to be one of the biggest influencers of student success. And doing these kinds of things shows a lack of trust from the teacher of the student, and then creates a lack of trust from the student with the teacher. And so you're trying to use these things for good cause, which is to improve student learning, because you don't want cheating to happen. But instead, what you're doing is a detriment to student learning. So,
there are free alternatives that work better. So, I mean, I'm not saying don't try to, if you set the expectation with your kids in a writing assignment that they're not supposed to use AI and you suspect that they did, there are free tools that include like a Draftback Chrome extension or a revision history, or a tool that I really like is Brisk AI, which I know you talked a lot about on this podcast, and it's an awesome tool. But they have a revision history tool that I think is super powerful. If you suspect a student of using AI, you can go back and see how many edits the kids made and over how long of a course of time, and if there's any big copy pasting incident, like moments that happened in the version history of that document. So there are tools that can do this. I do think Brisk has AI detection too that'll kick out like a percentage score. I wouldn't recommend using that, but I really like their revision history tooling. So there are tools to help you monitor this stuff. It's just I wouldn't use the Turnitins and the GPT zeros of the world. I think better alternatives.
Yeah. Oh, well, and I think what's good about those alternatives is what they're looking at is the process the learner went through while they wrote, not the product that came out of the writing. And that's really what we need to do. I think that's going to lead into the other stuff that I'm going to let you share here in a second. You're like, I know you're itching to share that stuff, but that's what we need to work on is the process, not the product. These AI detectors are looking at just the product. Things like revision history, which will show when the kid worked on the document, how long, how many edits, what they typed, what day, and Draftback that'll show it as a process, and Brisk that'll also do that. Those tools let you see. And then if you, like, as you said, if you see a big chunk of text come in, all of a sudden, then maybe they did copy it over from ChatGPT. That's a more effective way to do that than just throwing it into those different tools. And you allude to this in the article, such great metacognitive things for writers to be doing anyhow, looking back at what their writing process and writing journey was like to see ways they can be better or what kinds of writing they're good at, where their skills are, what their strengths are. So it's not just a tool that will help us notice when AI is there. It's a tool that will help us grow good writers, I think.
100%. I was just going to say that, like, we don't need to just view these tools as like punitive and like to enforce our anti-AI policies. It's like there's tremendous formative assessment value here in getting kids to be owners of their own learning and reflect on their process. And yeah, like I could literally imagine an assignment where it's like, make me a screencast where you walk me through, your process editing this document, explaining step by step, the changes that you made to this document over time. Like there's tremendous formative assessment value in that. So yeah, there's a lot of learning potential that can come out of this as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I worked back in the day with my friend, Dr. William Kist, who at the time was with Kent State University here in Ohio. Now he's no longer with the university, but he still does work in the English and language arts space and writing. And we did work with a group of teachers. It was called Writing Ourselves was the project. And we were focused on high school writing classes primarily, a little bit middle school too. And the kids made digital portfolios of their writing, not just of their finished products, but of the process. So in the portfolio was a brainstorming document, was a first draft, was the feedback on the first draft, was the second draft, because that's what they really cared about. They were saying what's important in writing is the process, not always just the product. And in it, we used Draftback to record a video. So we would take a screencast of Draftback feeding back their writing process, I think is what we did. It's been a long time ago, and put that in their digital portfolio, which I think was a really, really cool way to do it. And then it has this added benefit of helping us see this. So I think that's kind of a first step of how we could teach and assess writing in the age of AI, which is to not use AI detection tools, instead to use some of these alternatives that let us look at what the process was like, not what the product is like. What's your 5-point plan, Adam?
That leads right into the first point of the plan here, which is like you need to have clear classroom policies and clear school policies around and really conversations up front with kids about what are your expectations with AI use? What does it mean to act with academic integrity on a specific writing assignment that you're assigning? And then being really intentional to make sure that your kids know those expectations and can follow those expectations. And so the best system that I've seen for this, there are now various varieties of it. I really like, and a lot of people don't, so I'd encourage you to challenge me on it, but like a simple red, yellow, green labeling system of, if I label this writing assignment red, you can't use AI. If you do, you're violating my academic integrity expectations and you can be held accountable. If I label it yellow, you can use some AI with specific constraints. And if you go beyond those constraints, again, you're going to be held accountable. And a green labeled assignment is not only can you use AI, the learning construct of this assignment is I want you to learn how to use AI effectively in your writing. So that's what I'm measuring. And so a part of the goal of this assignment is to teach you how to use AI effectively. So I want you to use it. I like the simplicity of that system, but I think the core insight is really just thinking about writing assessment through this lens of a tiered layer of influence. And so we actually did a webinar with Short Answer with Dr. Mike Perkins and Leon Furs, who are doing some research around this. They're calling it the AI assessment scale. And maybe this is something we can link in the show notes.
For sure, yeah.
And so they have instead of a red, yellow, green 3-level system, they have a 5-point system. I've seen other people that are doing 5 to 7-point systems around like with specific, it's almost like a rubric. And within each one, we've got a description of what AI use looks like. I think this is another example of one of those moments where it's like everything works somewhere, nothing works everywhere. Teachers need to find what's going to work best for their context, but just sort of practically accepting that if and when writing leaves the classroom, there's a pretty good chance, especially at the middle and high school level, that AI is probably going to have an influence on that writing once it leaves the classroom. And we just need to adjust accordingly and take a practical lens on this. And I think the AI assessment scale that Leon Furs and Dr. Perkins have promoted and has now been interpreted in many different ways, I think is maybe an effective first step. And then pairing that with the tooling that we just talked about, which is like revision history tracking, and being up front with kids about, hey, I am going to track your revision history here. Because there's been some really meaningful conversations on social media I've seen recently on like, is it a little bit surveillance-y to not let a kid have their like, private process of writing? Because I can think of a million different things that I might put into a blog post in the first, when I'm just kind of like word vomiting words onto a page that I wouldn't necessarily want seen by others.
Good point. Yeah.
So I want to plug real quick. Her name's Anna Mills. I follow her, and she's a great follow on Blue Sky and on Twitter, and just around this dialogue on writing, instruction, and assessment. I look to her work a lot. So yeah, I think so point one of the plan is just, we got to have clear classroom policies. And oftentimes that means having conversations up front with kids about what effective use looks like. And there's a whole larger conversation there around academic integrity. And I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole or not, but really, I think we need to also reframe in schools how we approach academic integrity. It can't just be a policy. It needs to be an expressed learning outcome that we're explicitly teaching to kids. Like, this is what it means to act with academic integrity in my ELA class or my social studies or math or whatever your content area is. Yeah. And explicitly teach it rather than what we currently do, which is like, basically define it by what it's not and assume kids know what that means. Where it's like academic integrity is not copy pasting off of ChatGPT, and it's not, stealing from your classmate, whatever they wrote. Or it's like we tell kids what it's not, and we often don't actually teach them what it is. And I think that's a transition that needs to happen too. But that's a whole larger conversation.
Yeah, you got me on that one. I never really thought about academic integrity that way. I have a couple follow-up points I want to make on that. I wholeheartedly agree with this plan of having clear classroom policies in place. I think something like that AI assessment scale, whether it's the red, yellow, green one or the one you shared about, I think, number one, from a classroom culture point of view, making things clear to kids is really effective, especially if we can involve them in those discussions and help them craft what that policy is. I think that might not be something that all teachers are comfortable with. I'm okay if you're not. I think it'll increase buy-in if you talk to the kids about what things can we do, what things can we not do, what should yellow look like, what should green look like, what should red look like. Even when it's green, what are the limitations we should have? Not only talking to kids about those things, which I think is almost a necessity. You have to talk to them about your policies. Yeah. But I think I would also encourage you to have an open discussion where it's right? It's both of you. It's you and the learners, not just you telling them what the policy is, which is the bare minimum we need to do. We also need to involve them in that.
I think you're making a really important point, which is just like kids need to understand the why behind, why are you doing what you're doing? Because I can understand where a kid, especially a high school kid, who may not want to do your writing assignment, and who may question the value of why should I have to do this if the machine can do it for me? You need to be explicit with that kid about here's why, and be intentional about that. So yeah, that dialogue is super important.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also it's that trust issue that we were alluding to earlier, right? The kid trusts you because you're being upfront and transparent with them. And it also creates that situation where the kid goes like, oh, right now we're on red. If that's the scale you end up using as that traffic light scale, that's a bummer. I really want to use my AI tools. But the kid is hopefully like, yeah, but he lets me be on green when he thinks it's appropriate, right? And so there's an understanding there that go with any rules, policies, expectations in a classroom, where if you're flexible, like if you're saying like talking about group work, right? Right now you get to choose who your partner is, but this other time I'm choosing for you, right? The kids are more likely in that kind of classroom when you choose for them to go like, yeah, but he let me choose myself yesterday. And today there's a reason, and he was transparent about what the reason is. And so kids can then understand and respect those decisions you're imposing on them because they know that you're flexible and have their best interests in mind. And I think that's the other important part I want to make before we move on to part two is that we need to be clear that the goal of school is the learning. Right. And so all of these things that we're doing are in interest of them learning to be really good writers. So every decision we make when we put it on red, it's not because that will create a flaw in the assessment and then I won't have an accurate grade for you, because the grade is not the priority. The priority is the learning. right?
Yep.
And so we have the expectations and the policies and the procedures and things like that in interest of learning, because that's what our goal is learning.
Exactly. And it's funny you say that, because we did a webinar with Dr. Dylan William, who's an advisor to us and for my money, like a godfather of modern K-12 assessment. And he talked about that because I brought up this red, yellow, green system. And he was like, red, yellow, green, fine, use it. But what's really interesting about this is like, just to what extent does AI serve the learning construct of whatever you're trying to teach? And if it doesn't, why are we even worrying about AI? Like, so what I like about the system, and it allows you to cater your policy to kind of to your point. It's breathable. You can have conversations with kids. You can sort of pick and choose how you want to use AI specific. It's not just like a blanket, like absolutely no AI ever. Because in some cases it might be useful, and in some cases it may not. It just depends on what the assessment construct of your assignment is. So I like it as a system for that reason.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Okay, so I'm guessing I may or may not have had a peek at what you want to talk about today. That the topic of Mr. Dylan William, who's one of my education heroes, may connect to your next topic here, because it may be about something that a lot of his writing is related to. So go ahead.
It kind of is. It's so point one is like, got to have clear classroom policies and conversations with kids. But then point two is, okay, if you are nervous about AI and you are still working on like the core skill of just kids putting words into sentences and into paragraphs, and you don't want them to use AI because you want them, you're still developing those foundational skills. And I think you're going to need to bring more writing back into the classroom. So point two is just more short, formative, targeted in-class writing instruction that is based around Dylan Williams. Sort of, he has a 5-point plan actually around formative assessment that's actualizing those best practices in formative assessment and really getting kids to think critically about writing instruction and about writing skills. And this is not a vendor session here, so I'm not going to sit here and plug Short Answer too much, but that's specifically why we're building Short Answer is for that in-class short form, meaningful conversations and social interaction around writing instruction. So that's the tool we're building. I'm happy to talk more about it, but you don't have to use Short Answer to do this. You can do really cool paper pencil stuff too with in-class, short form writing experiences as well that I'm happy to talk about.
Yeah. I want to jump in on that one and point out, like, there are certain times when ed tech companies, which Short Answer is, I don't know if that feels crazy for you to have an ed tech company.
It does.
There's ones that I feel differently about, and there's certain ed tech companies that I really root for because they are coming from a place of trying to do something good for in the classroom. There's plenty of them out there. But for example, in the most recent episode of the podcast, I talked to Dan Stitzel, and Dan was talking about when he saw Josh, I don't know how to pronounce Josh's last name, the founder and originator of GimKit. When he saw him speak years ago, Josh, as a high schooler, realized that he really liked gamified learning experiences and was really interested in coding, and in a high school class developed a tool that later led to him creating GimKit, which is a gamified classroom thing. And so it's easy to cheer for GimKit because it's this guy who wanted like a certain thing to exist in the classroom, right? It wasn't a money grab. And so Short Answer, similarly, you have this thing that you're trying to work towards, which is finding a way to make this short, formative, targeted in-class writing happen and be digestible and be fun for kids. Yeah. And Dylan William, I know you've done a webinar with him too, correct? Is that right?
We have, yeah. And I'm happy to link it in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. And so Dylan William talks a lot in his work about formative assessment and about the power of formative assessment. And I think that's a huge first step we can make in all classrooms in the age of AI. We should have made before the age of AI, but also in writing classrooms, is moving more of it to be formative and doing less summative, because if we don't see the writing process and we don't see the little bits and pieces, it's easy to be tricked and to let AI sneak in. And if we do these short formative assessment things, number one, it's harder to be tricked. And number two, it shows kids that our focus is on the process. Our focus is on them as writers. Our focus is on helping them grow. Our focus is not on catching them cheating. Our focus is not on grading, right? Our focus is on what's happening during the thing. So that's my roundabout and long way to say, please do tell us about short answer. I know that it feels awkward because you don't want to feel like you're selling here, but I think people need to hear about it. Everybody comes on this show and talks about tools that they love. Short answer is a tool that I love. It's a tool that you love. You love it for extra reasons, but tell us about it. Go for it.
Yeah. I mean, context. I was a teacher for 7 years. It grew out of that experience. It started as my master's capstone project at Stanford. We got some grant funding and launched it a year ago. So it's very new. It's only been around about a year. The fastest way to get it across is just think like Kahoot for writing. Like kids sign in with a code. You send out writing prompts to students or questions. Students respond. It's all constructed response. So they can type their text or attach pictures. They rate their confidence in their submission, which I think is an important point, and submit it. And then once the teachers got all those responses, they push them back to the class. It's a really important part of this. Is it's all based around peer-to-peer interaction and creating social experiences for kids. I think that's really important, and I want to come back to it. But so teacher pushes responses back to the class, and then in a variety of gamified activities, the kids will see each other's responses.
I hate to leave you with a cliffhanger, but this is a to be continued situation, folks. I'm really sorry, but we will pick up where we left off with Adam in next week's episode. He's got more to tell us about the functionality of short answer, which I am super excited about, as well as the rest of his tips for teaching writing in the age of AI. You are not going to want to miss the rest of the conversation. There is so much goodness in it. So make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss it. Again, it's coming next week, but just whatever app you're in right now, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, whatever you're in, make sure you're subscribed or following the show so that it'll come right into your feed as soon as that episode drops next week, and so that you don't miss it. Also, before we jump into the next part, before you go, I do want to point out Short Answer has been a sponsor on the show before and will be a sponsor in the future. I intentionally didn't include them as a sponsor today because I thought it was kind of a conflict of interest to have them sponsoring the episode that Adam was in. Those are two completely different ventures, them sponsoring the show and Adam being on the show. He's on the show as an educator. And when I have a company like Short Answer sponsor the show, or like MirrorTalk from Swivl today, or Vizor today, these are companies that I believe in. So that's why Short Answer is also a sponsor. Certainly, I'm not going to turn away a great sponsor that helps fund the making of this show. They're a great tool. They're not a sponsor for today, but they'll be back as a sponsor in the future. Before we wrap up the show, let's take a quick look at some education news that has caught my attention. First up, an update from one of my very favorite tools, Pear Deck. So we know that many tools now let teachers generate activities and lessons with AI, but those tools don't have the awesome lesson delivery features that Pear Deck does. And now their users have access to AI-powered instant Pear Decks. As you'd guess, you just enter a topic, a standard, a link, or even a file, and bam, a full lesson is ready to go right inside a Pear Deck. As always, we know pedagogy and our content better than an AI tool does. So if you try it, make sure you proofread it. And then afterwards, please tell me, did it do a good job? Did it hit the standard well? Did it ask good questions? Was it easy to use? I want to hear about it. So reach out, preferably on Blue Sky or via email or the speak pipe for the show or something like that, and let me know. Did it work well? If you'd like to see this in action before trying it out, I will put a link to a video from my good friend Stacy Roshan in the show notes where she did a tutorial and a demo of this feature and some other new Pear Deck features. Next up, Canva added a new feature called Dream Lab that lets teachers generate curriculum-aligned visuals in seconds. So detailed plant cells, historical timelines, whatever you need, just type it in. Dream Lab makes it for you. It could be a game changer for making abstract concepts more accessible and engaging. I know there were times in my classroom, whether it was when I was teaching math or when I was teaching science or when I was teaching STEM, where I'd spend like my whole planning period just trying to make a visual for the next lesson. And it really was such a small facet of the lesson, but it was such a big thing in terms of my students' understanding, if that makes sense. Like, it was so important. It seemed like such a small thing to spend a lot of time on, but so important that it deserved that much time. Now with something like Dream Lab, we could potentially have it made automatically. Now, I haven't tried it out in depth and tried out a bunch of things with it. So if you do try out Dream Lab and Canva, again, reach out. Let me know what you think of it. Hit me up on Blue Sky or the speak pipe for the show or something like that and tell us, how did it work? Next up, a googly update. They have added a new way to manage who can respond to forms. For most of us, it's just a new interface to have to learn, and the buttons that we're used to clicking are no longer in the same places. For those of us who create tutorials, it means you have to re-record your Google Forms videos. Sorry about that. But it does have some benefits. So I think this is actually a good change. For some of us, it's just going to be a pain. But for teachers in particular, if you're using this in your classroom, I think it's going to be a benefit. So previously, you could choose to let anyone who has the link respond to a Google form, which was the kind of the default, or you could restrict it to people in your domain. That was your only option. You could either say limit it to my domain, or you could say anybody who has a link can respond, right? And you just wouldn't give the link to everybody, but technically if Joe Schmo and who knows where got the link, they could respond to your form, or everybody in your domain. Now the problem would be, what if you limit it to everybody in your domain and it's something for your first period class and you don't want your second period class to respond? Somehow they get the link and they respond, right? There's nothing stopping them from that. So now this new feature does stop that. So now you could set your form so that only specific students or classes or groups can respond. So you could say just these users or just this Google Classroom group, this roster, or just this group of email addresses can respond. So you could designate who the form works for. It won't work for anybody else. And what you could do then is add in that second period class later when you're ready for them to be able to respond. So the link could be there and you could just not open it up. Kind of a nice way, if you're using Google Forms for assessments, you could post it in, say Google Classroom or whatever, and then make that change later. There's better ways to do it, but you could say, the link's there, but it's not going to work until I put your email address in. So those are 3 new updates. AI generated instant Pear Decks, Canva Dream Lab, and new restrictions to who can access a Google form. So I'm curious, which one of those 3 updates are you most excited about? Again, let me know on Blue Sky. Use the hashtag #EduDuctTape. Tell me all about it. If you want to let me know on a different social media, that's totally fine too. I'm on all of them, but Blue Sky is currently the one I'm most excited about. There's also a speak pipe for the show where you can record that feedback, and other ways you can reach out. And you're certainly welcome to reach out via email too. Well, just like how my wife eventually helps my kids find their flannel PJ pants or their toothbrush, it's time to find the end of this episode. She's still waiting for that magical kid request system, but luckily today's sponsor, Vizor, makes managing IT issues in schools easy. With features like a self-service portal and automated tasks, students never need to yell, "Tech person!" For special pricing and some awesome swag, head over to vizor.cloud/Jake. That's vizor.cloud/Jake. Trust me, Vizor makes managing Chromebooks look easier than my wife makes managing our kids' stuff look. And thanks to Vizor, and thanks also to today's other sponsor, Swivl, and their new tool, MirrorTalk.ai. Have a great day, everybody.